Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, cool. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. And you?
A bit nervous, but we'll see how it goes.
I am, but I'm trying not to be, because I said to myself while I was getting ready, I know him, he knows me, and it's really to talk about the truth, so I don't have to make anything up. So It should go well.
Yeah. At least the good news is that at least you are the one that's going to kickstart this particular project. So, but most importantly, thank you for doing this for us. Really appreciate it. And as I stated, it's going to be a bit informal, so that at least we're both relaxed to ask the needed questions. And yeah, and that's about it really. And the whole point is to just have this chat to just, showcase to the world, particularly, younglings, young folk who are at this point thinking about what can I do in the future? Are there other alternatives apart from what I see on TV, particularly in the Black diaspora? So even though the channel primarily focused on STEM related, it's still open to showcase other aspects of Afro excellence, if you want to put it in that context, and that's basically what this is about. All right.
Great.
Okay, cool. So to kickstart, do you want to introduce yourself to the world?
Well, hello world. I'm Mary, and I actually know you through my sister, and I've always admired what you do, because I know you work in academia. I don't, but it has always been one of my career options, but I haven't quite sort of reached that goal as yet. It's still on my bucket list. And I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a full-time career woman also, and I'm also, I would say, someone of many hats, meaning I'm always up to something. If I'm not working, if I'm not with my kids, I'm always working on some project. I'm always planning something social. I'm always cooking up a storm in the kitchen. Put it simply, I'm always busy, and I enjoy that. So that's me, always on the move. Yes.
All right, that's great. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. So what is your primary profession?
Yes, so I'm an employee relations advisor. I work for UNICEF as an international children's organization, where I provide employment law and employee relations advice on behalf of the organization to mitigate any employment law risk and any employee relations risk for UNICEF UK. I do this on a full-time basis. We advise managers, we write policies, we work on projects, we sometimes work with head office, we sometimes work with other country offices, but the main sort of objective of my role is to mitigate any employment law risk for UNICEF UK. That's what I do.
Wow, yes. That sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It does sound fancy, but on a day-to-day, it's really giving clear, compliant, practical advice to make sure that the organization is sound when it comes to any employment decisions they make. Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so let's talk about your progression leading to this point of your career. So what made you decide to study law?
Right. I was thinking about this whilst getting ready for this interview because, to be honest, I didn't want to come in with a script. I wanted to be as authentic as possible and really present myself in a very natural and engaging way. So I said, what could I say about myself? How far back do I go? I think it all started with my obsession, if I were to use the word, for
Mm.
words. As far back as I can remember, I've always been obsessed with words, so much so that I recall on many occasions getting in trouble for it. I would always come across a new word and then I would use it as sophisticated, well, in my opinion, as possible. And it somehow didn't always fit into context. So you can
Mhm.
imagine, what one thing led to another. So that's really where it all began. So because of this love for words and the use of words, I was an avid reader. I was very curious. I asked lots of questions and I always wanted to write. I remember from the time I was about 6, 7, I told my dad, I'm going to write a book and I would love for you to help me to publish it. And then I remember when I was 8 or 7, I also said, I want to work for the United Nations and what do I need to do that? And my dad always encouraged me to learn foreign languages. So that's where my love for words moved on to a love for foreign languages. I learned French and Spanish when I was in secondary school. And I was so much into it that I think when I was 15, yes, just about 15, I actually matriculated into university. So I started university at the age of 15, I believe. And I did a BA in modern languages.
Okay.
It was an amazing experience. Yes. Were you
Yeah.
going to ask something?
Yeah. Don't mean to kind of. That's the part that's quite interesting because unlike the UK and other countries where you need to get a level 5 qualification before going into university, so that's your A level and things like that. In Barbados, once you've passed your O level, you are able to progress to university. Is that
Oh,
correct?
actually, it's quite similar to the UK because even though you are allowed to go to university, you still have to do an extra year at university. So
Okay.
that extra year you do at university is almost topping you up
Yeah.
as though you're doing A levels. So
Okay.
whilst most people who did the A levels did a 3-year degree, my degree lasted 4 years.
Oh
So I
yeah.
did a 4-year degree in modern
Okay.
language.
So
Yeah.
the whole idea is it starts at level 100 instead of level 200 because normally
Yes.
unis, yeah. So okay, that makes perfect sense. But I think at least it gives you the opportunity to at least experience university life and make
Yes.
the
And I
needed.
learned,
Yeah. Oh, that's it. But this is what I find interesting though, because everything that you're saying leads into the usage of words, languages, and things like that. You went to university, you studied modern languages. So, where did that transition into law come into effect?
yes, that's a really good question. So after doing languages, I actually got, you could describe it as a scholarship. There were a select few students who were chosen to go on a 1-year teaching program in France.
Hmm.
So the students who graduated with the best grades were chosen to work for a year in a secondary school in France. I was one of them. And it was at this time when I said, well, what are my options? What could I possibly do? You see, I think that's probably one of the dangers when you're a lover of knowledge and education. You want to
Hmm.
do everything, so much so that you don't quite know how to refine your options.
Hmm.
So I said to myself, if I'm into languages, if I enjoy writing, research, I would say I'm more of an argumentative academic. I, I never really wanted to be an advocate,
Mm.
but I always wanted to get into the nitty gritty, the research, provide that one-on-one advice. That's probably why I'm in my current role as opposed to a barrister before the court of law. So I said law was probably the most sensible option in terms of my strengths, in terms of my interest. And also my dad's also a lawyer. So, you know, growing up, I've always had that inspiration, that environment, that culture where you talk about cases. So that fascination was, I would say, maybe nature and nurture.
Nature and
So
nurture.
I moved on from languages to law. And then once again, I was one of the select few to be offered the European law program. So the standard LLB degree is for a duration of 3 years. But if you want to study European law, that's a 4-year program. And you either choose, I think, German, French, or Italian law. So in your 4th year, you choose one of those area of expertise in law. So I was offered to do the European law program with French in my 4th year. But then having spent a year abroad doing that program, I said to myself, I might as well just get on with the 3-year LLB program. I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse. It was just something I decided. And I did the 3-year LLB course. Then after that, I went on to do my master's. I did an LLM in employment law at LSE. Then after that, I reached what you'd call a crossroads, where I knew certainly I wouldn't want to go into advocacy. I was toying with the idea of academia, going into teaching, but there was something so fascinating about working within what I would say HR law, this multidisciplinary aspect of law where you're working in an organization, you're providing advice, you're writing policies. Once again, being a person of many hats.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, as a safety net, I would still qualify as a solicitor. And then after that, I started off my career in employee relations / employment law.
All right, cool. All right, so just going, paddling back to your start into law. Which university you go to?
So I was at Warwick University for 3 years.
Okay.
This was after my year in France, where I was a teaching assistant for a year. Fantastic experience. Highly recommended, not so much so teaching, but a gap year. I think that's what the millennials are doing now before they embark on their undergrad studies.
Okay.
It really gives perspective. For those who are quite unsure, I was sure of my career path, but for those who are unsure of their career path, it's a great option. Getting that work experience or getting that life experience before embarking on undergrad studies.
Oh, okay. That's cool. All right, so at least it's good that you brought that up, because sometimes youngers that look like us tend to not push themselves too much into what I call the high-end universities, because they have this perception that maybe they're not good enough to enter such an institution, but that's not really the case. So at least it's good that you've highlighted that you went to Warwick, and if you've got the needed requirements, then that shouldn't really be an obstacle. So at
It
least
should never be. I mean, I do identify with that. Let's call it a complex, because it is complex.
yeah.
Let's call it a complex. I identify with it, but I have never made it sort of an obstacle or made it public. It's something I would say you're more than welcome to sort of battle with it internally. When you make that application or you present yourself in an interview, that should never ever come between you and an opportunity. When you go home at night or after the interview, then you can beat yourself up and think, oh, maybe it wasn't good enough. But when you sit there and you present your CV or your background, you must always tell yourself, I have an opportunity. Nothing else should come in between that, Yeah. You should really strive for the best and just see what possibilities they are, because you could be pleasantly surprised. And the thing is, I remember in primary school, we had a teacher who always said, it's quite a tacky expression, but I don't know why it stuck with me all these years, meaning there is some sort of depth to it. It goes, always reach for the stars, because if you don't make it to the stars, at least you'll be on the treetops. If you don't aim to be with the best, you may you just might always stay at ground level.
Yeah.
So it's really important not to shortchange ourselves and always think that we can't do as well as others because of a characteristic or because of our upbringing or because of our current context. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Because that's something that I always tell my kids or your nephew and niece, that you either strive to be the best or amongst the best. So that's always the piece of daily advice I always give them, just to push them. Because again, you're only limited by your inhibitions. So you just need to have that confidence to believe, and no matter what the obstacles are, just do your best to get to where you believe you should be. So
Absolutely.
well said, well said. All right, so you graduated Warwick. You went to, I believe, London School of Economics to get your masters. So once you achieved your masters, what was the next agenda? What was the next plan?
Yes, so as I said earlier, the next plan really was to be sure about my career options. And to talk a bit about that, I would want to add that when you reach crossroads in your career path, you may not be quite sure, where to turn.
Mm-hmm.
So to be safe, always do as much as you can, even though you may not need those qualifications or those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You will have nothing to lose. You would always gain. So that's somehow a preamble to answer your question, because after my master's in law, I went ahead to law school. That's the qualifying certificate to become
Okay.
a solicitor.
All right.
I haven't practiced as a solicitor, and I knew I wouldn't. But if the opportunities were there, the resources were there, why not? Because it was a year where I got to learn more about the law. I met some intelligent and interesting people. I was also had more time to really think about my options. And that's something you really wouldn't have once you have a family and you have a job and you have bills to pay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have opportunities to study, I would say just do as much studying as possible. So I did my qualifying certificate to become a solicitor, the LPC, the legal practice course. So in the UK, you can either do the BVC to become a barrister, bar vocational course, or the LPC to become a solicitor. And I'll just add as a side note that when you're doing that course, you're going to find many people who studied engineering for undergrad, who studied history, who studied economics. And it goes to show that we should never sort of put ourselves in a straitjacket. We've had doctors who decide to become engineers after. We've had historians who decided to pursue a career in law.
Mm.
After doing that LPC course, that's when I realized that I would want to work in an organization where I can provide sort of multidisciplinary skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got into HR law, working in employment law. I started off in an investment bank.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved into the insurance sector, took some time out, started a family, and then here I am today at UNICEF.
Oh, okay. Very, very interesting. So, how long does it take for anyone to achieve the professional qualification in law? Is it a year? Is it 2 years?
Classically, it would be the 3-year LLB plus 1 year doing the professional certificate.
Okay, so it
If
takes a
you were
year.
probably counting as I was speaking, I think my university studies spanned over 10 or 7 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking back, it was probably the best experiences of my life ever. because when you're studying, the experiences you have go beyond what you're learning in the book.
Mm-hmm.
You are learning how to make friends that will last a lifetime.
Mm.
You're also learning how to live on your own. You're
Yeah.
also learning how to become responsible in
Mm-hmm.
terms of meeting deadlines and in terms of making key choices. Should I go to the union or should I go to the library? Should I hang out with this group or
Mm-hmm.
should I just be a loner and sort of ride it through? You know, lots of decisions you have to be making that before, when you were in school and your parents were picking you up every day, you never even had to think about.
Yeah.
So it's a really enriching experience. Yes.
Okay. So for anyone to progress to become a practitioner in law, you need 3 years, at least 3 years undergrad studies. You don't
Yes.
necessarily need to pursue a master's degree, do you? To
No, you don't. Once again, that was by choice.
That was
Yes.
by choice. Okay, so once you've done 3 years undergraduate, then you can then proceed to pursue your professional qualifications to practice as a barrister or a solicitor.
Yes.
Okay.
And what we find is that increasingly, most people who are pursuing the barrister or solicitor course don't necessarily do their 3-year LLB in law. They come from a multitude of backgrounds. And, you know, I have done internships in top law firms. And looking back, I realized that the employers, the lawyers actually appreciate that broad thinking, that
Mm,
perspective that comes with someone who studied other subjects but has an interest in becoming a lawyer.
mm,
Mm.
okay. Cool. That's nice to know. So in terms of your career journey, what's been some of your highlights? Some of the things that you can say you feel proud of achieving or doing? I mean, it doesn't need to be anything ginormous. It could be anything.
I mean, there's so much. I think, especially as someone who is deeply passionate about my work, literally any deadline I meet, I would see as a highlight. But I would talk more of an experience as opposed to delivering an outcome. My biggest achievement to date would have been crossing that sort of milestone of becoming a mother
Okay.
and relocating back to the UK and securing my role at UNICEF UK. I mean, many listeners to your channel perhaps may not quite be at that stage yet where they're
Mm,
setting up and whatnot with a family, but they will have to sort of make sort of big decisions
mm,
in their career path. And it's moving from a difficult point where you think, okay, I've lived in France for 4 years. I've just had my first child.
mm-hmm.
I haven't worked in my field for a couple of years. How am I going to market myself? What do I do next? You know,
Yeah.
so being able to secure that role in spite of the odds. And this goes back once again to what you were saying about not aspiring, us not wanting to aspire for the best. I mean, how can someone who sort of put their career on hold to relocate to a foreign country, get married, have a child, think, okay, I can work for UNICEF. I can be one of their, you know, advisors. I can do this. It was possible. Why should I apply to work at the shop next door just because of those gaps?
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be pleasantly surprised, as we were saying earlier. So that's what happened. And in fact, the UNICEF experience was quite interesting because I made my first application to the organization and I was given a first stage interview and I was rejected. I couldn't quite understand why I was rejected, but what I do know is that I spent hours on that application. And strangely enough, a month and a half down the line, I saw the same position being advertised. And I thought, If I spent that long on this application, why not send it again? I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So I sent my application again, had a first stage interview, had a second stage interview, and was even in the position to negotiate salary when I was made an offer. So this goes back to the point we were making earlier. We should never really underestimate ourselves. Literally anything is possible.
Mm. Nicely said. Nicely said. So hopefully anyone that's listening to this at least will get some words of encouragement not to, let anything stand in your way, no matter what the odds are. Just focus, persevere, and just keep on persevering. You know.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
if you require any feedback, solicit feedback so that you know what to do in the next go. So yeah, that's very aspirational. Okay, so moving on. So let's talk about your next challenge. Because I know that right now you are writing books for kids. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's quite funny you asked because these books I've been writing, it's more of has always been a personal hobby. And every time I discuss it with others, they somehow raise the bar and think, wow, this is major. So once again, I would say another moral lesson coming out of this. If you see everything as a passion, as a hobby, to the world, it would look like a major achievement. Why? Because it's something you personally want to excel in. It's something you're passionate about and something you want to do. For me, it's just something I do in my spare time, but it's really transformed the lives of kids who are reading it, parents who've bought it for kids. So I'll backtrack and talk a bit about that. Um, so around the time when I made my application to UNICEF, I think yes, my daughter was 2. And I saw so many gifts in her already at the age of 2, which I'm sure all parents see in their kids once they begin to babble and talk and explore, discover the world. And I remember one day looking into her eyes and thinking, I never want her to lose that awe she has of the
Mm,
world around her. And this is why my first book was called My Book of Awesomeness. That book is really an opportunity for kids to take stock and realize how literally awesome they are and how capable they are of achieving anything. The book is ideally written for kids, I would say, primary to pubescent stage. So let's say from 5 to 11. But there are
mm,
times when I myself go into the book and fill in the lines and answer some of the questions. It's a workbook, it's a diary, it's a book with inspirational quotes. So young girls can really introspect and think about how amazing and capable they are.
mm.
That was my first book. It did very well. Interestingly, it did really well in America. We had lots of sales, thanks to
Wow.
my parents who also promoted the book. And then, they say, I'm sure you can identify with this, given your area of expertise. Once you're onto something, you're onto another and another and another.
Mm,
So today I have written 9 books in total.
wow.
And the key ones to me would be that one. Then I also wrote a book called Hey Kids, Let's Talk About Race from A to Z. This book was published at the peak of the George Floyd
Mm,
Black
mm,
Lives Matter movement.
mm-hmm.
And I remember watching on TV the protests that were going on and how outspoken many young kids were. And I thought to myself, what's my role? It's that sense of duty. And that's what I'm hoping kids today will continue, because it's been amazing what we've been seeing on TV. So I
Mm-hmm.
ask myself, what's my role? What role can I play in this movement? And I thought I'll use my writing skills. So I was targeting the very young age group. Once again, it's a book I personally enjoy reading
Mm-hmm.
myself, but it's really written in a very simplified and engaging manner. So every page talks about a concept to do with race,
Yeah.
and that concept begins with the letter of the alphabet. So we're
Wow.
starting from A, which talks about Africa, then B, which talks about Black, then C talks about the civil rights movement, D talks about dignity, E talks about equality, and on and on and on. And
Oh.
it's really get for kids to get thinking, and it's also to facilitate discussions between parents and young kids about race. So
Wow.
that's, yeah,
Oh.
that's another
Oh,
publication.
excellent. Excellent. So just to put it out there, if there's any viewer who wants to purchase any of your books for their kids, where can they? Where's the outlet? Where can they get it to buy?
All my books can be found on Amazon, Amazon US, UK, Canada. I would say the main Amazon outlets throughout the world. You can
Okay.
purchase it online. Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is when I go review this record and have it edited, I'm going to put some links out there and thumbnail images of the books that you've written today. So
Ooh.
that should more or less appear at the end of the video. So, all right. So yeah, so that's great. All right. So let's get into back to your career journey, and this time we're more or less looking at some of the challenges that you actually faced. Do you believe that you faced any challenges, particularly being a person of African descent?
Hmm. Um, we could call them challenges. We could call them awkward situations. I would say we are somehow always reminded of who we are
Mm-hmm.
when placed in social settings. So you see, once again, this is yet another call to young people out there who are pursuing various academic subjects. The subjects, the academic matter, is not really should not ever be an obstacle, because once you have that opportunity, you can study the subject. It's really when you go out there in the wider world in a social context. So to go back to your question, you asked about challenges. Um, for example, when I was doing my internship or various work experience stints, I would recall being at a table or socializing with my peers, and they make certain jokes, or they were eating and everyone is ordering a pint of beer and another pint of beer, or these are very simple sort of actions, but they are connected to race and culture to an extent, because we're not just a people of color, as some say, but it's also our culture, how we're brought up. So when somehow I found myself in these different contexts, it's a stark reminder that no matter what you study or where you go, you will always be who you are. We are studying these subjects so we can make a difference and contribute to the great work that's been done. But it doesn't negate the fact that you are a Black person, you are African, you're African American, you're Asian. And being that means you come from a home setting, you come from a culture where the norms are different to other people's norms. I will have my meal with a glass of water. For others, it would be 3 pints of beer. You know, there's also this um, conversational culture, perhaps of talking about the weather. You know, we get used to it the more we work in that environment, but or the music, taste of music. So it's these little sort of cultural snippets of culture that makes you realize that you are who you are, you're different. And it's a fantastic thing because you can contribute to conversations, you can add, you know, a touch of diversity to what's being discussed. But ultimately, it reminds you that you are different and you should be proud of who you are, as opposed to that need or that pressure to assimilate. You can contribute to this diverse dialogue by bringing what you've been raised with, what you've learned as an African person, as a Black person, as an Asian person. Yes. So those are the, I would say I wouldn't, it's tricky to call them challenges because it somehow perhaps gives it a negative slant, but I would say challenges from a positive angle, because once again, you can have a challenge, but it can be an opportunity depending on how you choose to approach it. So those have been opportunities. I mean, to be honest, in the early days of my career, it has been awkward because you would normally stay silent because it's almost like a culture shock. But as you grow, as you build your confidence, you begin to see these as opportunities.
Well said. Some very wise words. So hopefully anyone that's listening would take that on board. So just to wrap a few things up, if any young adult or any person, you know, whether mature, if they wanted to pursue law, what do they need? What are some of the skills that they need? So what type of qualifications do they need and what type of skills? It could be interpersonal skills. What would you say are the ideal skill set that one needs to pursue law?
Okay, let's talk a bit more firstly about the technical skill set. As I said at the beginning, towards the beginning of the interview, you don't necessarily have to have studied law for A levels, because now they are encouraging sort of a broad range of experts to come in.
Yeah.
You could have studied science for A levels and decide, you know what, I wouldn't quite mind being a lawyer. But ideally, you should have perhaps had an interest in history, literature, the fine arts, history, literature, politics, sociology, business. Those are the classic fields that would somehow give you the skills, the ability to synthesize material, the ability to put forward strong arguments for and against. So if you've come from that background, you're somehow setting up yourself for a great career in law. But you shouldn't feel limited by what you've studied in the past. The legal profession is open to a broad range of sort of experts in different areas. In terms of soft skills, the first and probably the biggest skill you need is you need to be curious. You need to be a reader. You need to be someone who always wants to know why. So maybe ideally you should have been a nagging toddler or or someone who loved words, as I said at the beginning of the call, because it's that curiosity, that ability to quickly, you should have a sense of humor also, especially common law. UK law does have a sense of humor because, as you know, we do have legislation, which is the technical law, but this law is interpreted by the courts. And the courts, you know, they're judges who are people like yourself and I. So when you do read their judgments, and you should be able to understand why they made certain decisions, and it can be quite entertaining. Once again, there needs to be that passion, that interest, and that's why you would find it entertaining, and that's how you can excel. So in terms of soft skills, be a reader, be curious. I think to survive in this field, you should never be complacent. You should never be happy in your comfort zone. Once again, that can be a blessing or a curse. A curse in the sense that you're constantly you're ambitious. You're never satisfied with what you have. But it's a blessing because it means you will always be making progress. You'd always be thinking, what's my next move? You'll be presented with a problem, a case, and you'd be trying to find loopholes, or you'd be trying to find arguments for and against, or you'd be trying to criticize what has been written. So it's being a reader, being curious, not being complacent, not accepting the status quo, always wanting to go beyond the minimum requirements or beyond what you perhaps find easy or straightforward to do.
Oh. Right, good advice. Good advice. So hopefully anyone that wants to study law at least know what to focus on in preparation towards making that decision to pursue law. So that's very interesting. Okay, so I think what I want to do is, I think down the line, maybe organize some form of live events where anyone that's interested in pursuing law can, ask questions. So at least something for us to think about and consider moving forward. Okay, so at least we're getting very close to the end of the interview. So just to wrap things up, what advice would you give anyone that's aspiring to pursue law?
It's not an easy profession. So I would say you need to have a clear conviction as to why you want to pursue that career.
Yeah.
And this conviction should follow you every day. You should live and breathe it because the demands are there, but it's also very rewarding. And to sort of mitigate that pressure and the demands that will come your way, you need to be clear in your mind why you're doing it. Because if you're not clear in your mind while you're doing it, you can give up easily.
Yeah.
I remember during my 3-year LLB program, we had a handful of students who dropped out or were not able to move on to the following year. You need to be committed and you need to know why you are studying it. That's why I think this channel is an excellent opportunity, because by listening to others, it can allow you to refine your thinking and decide what it is exactly you want. It's probably the very first step. It's the very first question you need to ask yourself. Why are you doing it? And, the best answers to why comes from within. It's not about, oh, my mom was a lawyer, so I want to be a lawyer, or it's a profession that pays well. Yes, that could be a factor, but it has to be something that comes from within, this sort of conviction, that you literally, you can't breathe if you can't pursue the profession. You wake up thinking of ideas. You become excited thinking about it. That is what everyone should at least satisfy themselves with before making that UCAS application or applying for that job. You need to know why, and the why should come from within.
Well said, excellent. Because that's always been the thing. Because anytime that you are interviewing young people, most of the time the first thing that pops up is all about the money. It's all about the money. It's not about, it's something that you aspire to do. So that can always be a stumbling block along the way when you realize that, oh my God, I didn't really make the right decision. So it's a very excellent point that you really raised, and hopefully any young listener will take that on board. So yeah, very, very insightful, very interesting, very engaging. All right, folks. So this is where we'll call it a day. I'd like to thank my sister-in-law, Mary, for dedicating some of her time over the weekend to at least share her journey in what she had to undertake to get to this point of her career. So thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for dedicating, sparing some of your weekend time. I know that this is a morning that you really want to spend with the kids and the hubby, but all the same, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I didn't even see the time go by so quickly. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
All right. Okay, folks. So there'll be more interviews down the road, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do this again with Mary. Hopefully, a live session for anyone that's interested in law to ask questions. You know, in terms of skill set, branches of law, because again, law is quite vast. There are different components to law. So hopefully we'll create that needed platform. And again, it will have to base it around Mary's time and availability. So yeah, so at least we've got stuff to look forward to.
We do
All right,
indeed.
yeah, we
Thank
do.
you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Mary, and hopefully we'll do this again.
We will.
All
Take
right,
care.
take care. Bye.
Bye.